Dang it. Dang it. Alright, you know what? That's it. I'm done. I give up. You know what? That rainbow's impossible. I'm out. Alright, welcome back to part 2 of the Revomaze introspective. Revo deity here again, talking about solving the Revomaze puzzle, specifically solving in mapping and the mapping techniques. So to summarize where we left off last time, the Revomaze puzzle is a sequential movement puzzle with the object is to navigate the core of the maze and get the dots on the sleeve and the core to line up, and then remove the core accordingly. So on the Revomaze website, we have aqua, turquoise, and blue. So this makes up the beginner series. And then after that, we have mint, green, titanium, bronze, and orange. This makes up the intermediate series. What's the difference? I don't really know. It's roughly categorized by difficulty. There's no clear-cut or governing rule on what applies to it or what makes Revomaze beginner versus intermediate. It's kind of arbitrary, based on what Revo HQ has come up with, but there's a clear distinction, I guess, between difficulty. So there's some sort of categorization where intermediate's harder. So then after that, we have salmon, copper, still trying to get the pin out on that. 2 different gunmetals shown here, indigo, not purple, Revomaze, get me purple, gray, and lime. So this completes the advanced series. Again, what's the difference? My best guess is just difficulty. There is some, arbitrary threshold. Some say that, indigo is, comparable to orange, which is an intermediate. Some say that salmon is easier and should be an intermediate, but it's just, again, kind of arbitrary. So then, outside of the advanced, we have the limited edition. We have, silver, handmade, gold, red. Now these are kind of in their own separate category, but usually associated with advanced, especially silver and handmade, which can be pretty challenging. So no, this isn't the complete collection. Just my collection, still missing a few. And I do have here shown as red, blue, and blue pro session or the plastic puzzles. So again, these are just reproductions of the metal or the extreme versions. So you can purchase these on the Revomaze website, based out of the UK, or you could get these through secondary means like auction websites, eBay, Puzzle Paradise, things like that, or someone willing to sell direct. The challenging part is finding them, especially when you try and buy direct. So you'll see on the website here that quite a bit of them are sold out. So you just have to keep track, focus on the website, and kind of come back periodically to see what's in stock, or use the shop watch or on the Revomaze Discord to keep paying attention to what pops into stock. So deciding on which one to start first, really kind of depends on what your goal is. If you're trying to find like the best Revomaze, you don't think you'll collect them all, you're trying to look for a good balance and a challenging one, then I'd recommend starting off with the bronze, the intermediate. It's a good challenge, roughly 30 to 40 hours to solve, and it's got a good balance. It's a dynamic puzzle, and it's not easy by any means. But if you're looking to collect, probably do as many of you as you can. I'd start at the beginning. I'd start with either aqua or blue. I'd recommend not doing turquoise first. Personally, I think turquoise is a bit harder than blue. But I go in order from beginner, intermediate to advanced. I started with intermediate, and going back to beginner still rewarding, but I feel that wouldn't have been. It's not as rewarding as if I would have started with the beginner series. So, why mapping? Some solvers, I know, don't map at all. They do this, purely mentally. Mental mapping just fine. But others like myself even had to map the beginner series. Mentally I, can't, precisely and accurately determine where I am in the maze, unlike others. So, I had to map as, many people do. So, before I get started into, going into the mapping discussion, I want to reiterate the most important thing is to do what works for you. The point is to have fun. If you're not enjoying yourself, then there's no point in doing the Revomazes. So if you're trying to, use someone else's mapping techniques or trying not to map at all, and you're not enjoying yourself, then there's no point. So, do what works for you and what works best. Some people solve it sideways or, vertically, differently. Find out what works best for you, which is, the second point is that the mapping techniques I'm going to go over today are mine and what I've developed. So the point is to provide some basic guidance and techniques that I use so you could form, your own method. So there are several out there. Some people use Excel to account for the pin diameter. Others get creative and create some, exquisite maps. Others like, Mark 76, renowned forum user, creates, the very intricate maps using a special computer program. So just, find what works best for you. So hopefully this video will help kind of provide some tips or techniques so you can try and find your own method. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. We're not going to be mapping the red here. I've put in a random core into this red sleeve, so thanks Amy for that. We're going to only do kind of a couple moves, so it shouldn't be clear on what core this is. So theoretically this is essentially spoiler free. I'm not trying to give it away. So my mapping technique kind of came from trying to get what fit well on a single sheet of grid paper. So here's a blank map for purple. So I have a grid that's roughly 40 rotational by 20 axially here. So we're going to be doing an example on this paper here. So this 2-to-1 ratio is roughly what Chris used on the blank orange map for the orange design competition. So first thing rotationally is I have a little tape measure that I've cut out and wrapped around this part of the sleeve here. So this part of the sleeve, the circumference is exactly 5 inches. So if you break that up into 1/8 inch increments, so each inch is a tick mark on here. That means a full 360-degree rotation is 40 tick marks. And what I do is, so here, the gripper really helps because what I do is, this is kind of my, my place on the map is I use the gripper, which really helps. And I typically line it with the serial number right here on the core. So I haven't done that here, so I could keep the serial number, covered up. So I'm the opposite. So it really helps because the sleeve is essentially, or not the sleeve, the gripper here is about the same diameter as this inner part of the sleeve here. So when you rotate it, you could line up and see, okay, so like I pull it out and it lines up with roughly 7 on the map. So this indentation, this mark here, helps me try or accurately determine my position on the map rotationally. So then axially, some people use calipers. They can get you pretty accurate, especially if you use digital. I find that when I was trying to use the calipers that I couldn't do it quickly enough, that I was spending a lot of time on the map, so I didn't use calipers. I just abandoned them completely. I ended up using my rulers. I found that was better. So again, kind of, whatever works best, for you. Some people like to create, really accurate and pristine maps. So my maps are, I like to be accurate, but it's not as clean, but it's more functional. So it's accurate for functional use rather than aesthetics. So then axial movement, so you'll see here when I pull it out, what I find, so again, I use English for rotation, but for axial movements, I actually use metric. Because trying to get the 40 by 20 tick marks, I couldn't, I guess for me personally, I couldn't get a good, division that used, the same breakdown of metric or same breakdown of English units. So when you pull out the core completely, a full extended thing to the solution is 40 millimeters. So what I do, and especially based on my ruler here, is, this goes by, 2 millimeters. So for me, 2 millimeters is, 1 tick on this box. So for instance here, this is about 10 millimeters or 10 ticks. 28 millimeters, so I'd go 10 ticks out. So let's go ahead and go over an example. So first, when I'm mapping, I sometimes will take my Revomaze on vacations or with me to other places. So I have, hard kind of like eyeglass carrying case and a bag that I'll put it in. And then inside that, I'll put in another bag here. And in this bag, I've got some rulers for transportation that are a little bit smaller. And then I've got different pens, hex driver to remove the core if I solve it. So the different pens are necessary, especially for different colors, for different elevations. So in the Revomaze, there'll be, different, step downs, for instance, to where the pin will drop down in elevations. So for different elevations, I'll use different colors. Well, I'll use, red typically for lowest elevation for a trap. I may use purple for another, etc. So let's go ahead and, restart this, and I'll kind of show you how I map. So as an example here, start from the beginning. Okay, so this one, like I said, about 7 is where it starts to come out, and it goes out, and I pull down, and I can't move to the right, and I can't move down any further. Okay, so it's about 7 on there, and then I measure, how far out it came. So again, every 2 millimeters is a tick mark. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So about 5 tick marks out, excuse me. So I use black for my path, and I use blue as a wall. So, came down here to 7, and then I came out to 5, like that, okay? And then what I use is I use blue initially as my walls. So I noticed that when I was pulling it out that I couldn't turn to the right, and then when I got here, I couldn't go down anymore. So I kind of use that as the wall. And sometimes you go back and change things. For instance, sometimes you may think something is a wall or not a path, and it might be. So I don't want to say any more than that without getting too spoilery. So I pulled it out, and I can't go down, I can't make a right. So I'm going to try turning left, and I'm able to go left. And let's say I got a little carried away. Okay, so I'm in the trap. So sometimes if I'm not keeping track, and if I land in the trap, I'll go ahead and map out the trap. So again, measuring here. So based on my tick mark scale, it comes out about 19 ticks. And based on where I am, I'm right around 1. So I will kind of draw this red as the trap. And I notice that it goes all the way in, so it goes all the way here. Sometimes, and I'm trying not to give away too much, sometimes you may notice that, you can only proceed one way. So let's say, I was going down here and I can only, turn left, and I couldn't go back, like there's a little ledge I'm falling over. I'll draw like a little arrow to where, I'm going over there and I'm dropping into that trap and I can't go back. So that way it kind of knows directionally that there's a little ledge there. It also helps you keep track of the elevation. So, that's about as far as I want to get into the different mapping techniques and kind of what I use. So again, those are the 2 main colors. I'll use black as my path, blue as the wall, red as the trap. And, I've got green and purple. I may have to go back and adjust the map as needed as I discover, more information. But again, it's just what works best for you. The pin that's actually in the Revomaze is about 3 millimeters in diameter. So what some people will do, what you saw earlier in the example, is they will actually, based on this path, draw a 3 millimeter space here, so they know exactly where the pin is traveling and progressing through the maze, which is nice. I kind of found myself struggling on doing that, so I abandoned that technique. So I just kind of go with the rough lines approach. I found that's what works best for me. So that's why I kind of use again the English and metric. It works great on the grid paper, which translated well into the Revomaze book. So this is just a random grid paper book that I got. I don't want to open it up, but it's got the necessary lines that I had for the grid that I created. And then I added a little flair to it for some styling. So that about covers it for part 2 of the Revomaze video. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments, and I'll try and address them accordingly. And you could also email me if you'd rather do that and get your questions answered. So, hopefully this is informative and kind of helps you on your mapping and solving of the Revomazes. So as I was editing my video, there was a few things that I missed that I wanted to talk about. I was really trying to keep it short on time, but also I was really trying to avoid spoilers this time, or anything that could remotely be considered a spoiler. So I was being a little careful, and in doing so I missed a few things. So first thing is that you don't need a gripper to do this mapping method. So, you could, based on the serial number, the flat part, which again I won't show, you could line that up with the measuring tape here to figure out where you are. And that's what I've done in the past without a gripper, is use that serial number, that flat part, to kind of be the center line of where I'm traversing. Second, I map, using the direction of, the core and, how the core navigates. So technically the pins in here and the pins navigating the maze. So you'll see other maps actually 180 degrees from this, so rotated, this way. But also from the map, you could put, roughly where you finish, which is, right down around here. That rotational part may vary. But, from here, when you map, the good thing about it is you can look at and identify different gaps in your map of places you haven't been and things you haven't discovered where you may not notice doing it mentally. So that's one of the things when people ask me for help, I'll say, well, map it out first. And also in doing so, I could add little notes in here, like I may notice something that's odd, or like maybe a dynamic component here. So I'll have notes in the bottom here to help me navigate through. And then also, I think you saw in the orange example that Chris had, some people map like this, where it's rotated 90 degrees and they kind of hold it like in this direction, where they kind of rotate and move it accordingly. So it's just, whatever works best. The grid paper also, for copper, for instance, with a smaller pin, it may not be refined. So sometimes I'll do, half squares, or I'll do in between, but I'll still kind of use this general breakdown. So, hopefully that kind of clarifies, a few other things. Again, if there are any questions, feel free to leave comments in the video, and hopefully I can address those one-on-one or in the next video. So, thank you.